Okay. This is the first group, right?
Nice. Yeah, we'll do the beginner thing first, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll come back in half an hour, right?
Half past, we'll
Yeah,
start
then-
the intermediate or advanced. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is intermediate or advanced, right?
No, you can. I think you can leave safely without anything too terrible going.
Okay. Okay. I think I'll just leave it here, and I'll come back in the half.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Everybody else cool? We're going to do some beginner stuff. Everybody else happy with that? All right. Cool. So yeah, I'm Nathan, and I thought I'd sort of talk about playing piano and keyboards. I'll talk about the harmony and theory side of things a little bit, but try and make it. I always think when people talk about harmony and theory, it's taught in a strange, kind of impractical way, and not in a way which can be sort of used. It's like talking about something for the sake of talking about it, and I'd much rather talk to you about some basic harmony and theory ideas in terms of things that you can use to maybe compose your own music, or to maybe even consider if you were to ever start writing melodies or solo improvising and things like that. So first of all, obviously I don't know any of you, so you have to forgive me if I ask some silly questions. Obviously I need to try and find out about a bit about what you know and what you don't know. But the first thing I'll try and make sure people do, and you guys might be doing this already, so apologies if it's a silly thing to say, but when you're writing songs, I think it's that it allows you to move around more quickly and make quicker decisions and slightly more musical decisions if you're aware of some of the basic fundamental theory ideas. Theory is a bit of a strange word for a lot of people, a bit of a word that usually means something boring, or people don't want to be interested. You know, it's kind of like, oh, you got to study and stuff, which you do. But it is the foundation, it's the building blocks of everything. So any music that you enjoy listening to, any music that gives you any kind of emotional reaction, it's giving you those reactions because somebody understands the building blocks of theory to begin with, or is at least aware of what the sounds are and how to make those sounds. So the first and most obvious thing that you guys need to do, and I'm really sorry to tell you this, is learn all your basic key signatures. I'm sorry, that's a really dull bit of advice. That's really boring. But the more of that stuff you know to begin with, the easier the writing process and the playing process is going to be in the long run, I promise. I'm not in the business of giving you pointless advice. I won't give you, because I don't want you to have to go through all the really pointless stuff. And there is pointless stuff out there, but I promise you this isn't one of them. So learning about your key signatures is super basic. I'm not going to go through them all with you because we only have half an hour, but something easy to do would be to give yourself a few to start with. So key signatures give us all the right notes within a certain key, right? Everybody is aware of this terminology, keys and key signatures, right? So that's why when people sit down and play the scale of C, the reason it sounds like that is because of the distance between each note, right? It's tones and semitones in a certain order. Same with if we start playing minor scale. So the fundamental thing I would say to begin with is to really get on and learn those things. And I'm so sorry to have to tell you that because it's pretty dull, but it does mean studying. Anyway, what comes shortly after that, and I think is the really exciting part, I think, where you start to see that actually music can be made, is when you start realizing that every single note, let's look at major keys, right? A major scale. I just played you a C major scale. Everybody knows the C major scale? It's like the best one, right? No. All right. Now, what some people may not know to start with, and some of you might, so, and again, excuse me if I'm saying things you already know. Each one of those notes has a particular chord that belongs to it, right? And we call this harmonizing the major scale. So every single note in every major scale has got a particular type of chord that belongs to it, depending on the degree of the scale. And by that, I mean whether it's the first note, second note, third, etc. A major scale will always have these particular chords in order, in this particular order. Does that make sense? So chord, you hear people talking about chords 1, chord 4, chord 5, etc. That's basically telling us which degree of the scale to be playing. Am I making sense? All right. Does anybody know the order in which those chords occur in a major scale? Is this all stuff you know already or no? Is this news to anybody? Give me a thumbs up if this is news. Some news. Okay. Give me a thumbs down if you know all this. Okay, we got like one across. We've got a couple of thumbs down. Okay, we've got a very split room, but I'll do it anyway. So, and there is a point to this, and I will get to it via this next point. So, I'll give you the order in which the chords occur. Right. Chord 1 in a major key is a major chord. Surprise, surprise. Chord 2 is a minor chord. Chord 3 is a minor chord. Chord 4 is a major chord. 5, so those of you who gave me the thumbs down, you should know 5 is a major chord. Chord 6 is a minor chord. Chord 7 is where things start getting a little bit unusual. We have a diminished chord. Now, we're talking about chords with 3 notes in, right? Do we all know what that's called?
Triad.
It's called a triad, right? 3 notes. The really exciting stuff comes when we start adding more notes later on, but we'll go through this for now, okay? Now, chords 1 to 6, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor. They're all major and minor chords, right? There's 3 of each. Now, I think this is a really useful and a kind of an easy exercise to use if you're ever struggling to start writing, if you're writing music and you're struggling to come up with ideas, particularly at this kind of basic level. We're talking about, you know, I was asked to do a beginner's class, so this is obviously really basic stuff. Chords between 1 and 6. If you were to take 4 of those chords, almost, I guess at random, you could try it at random if you're not sure. If you pick 4 numbers between chords 1 and 6 and play them in order, because they all belong to the same key, ultimately they're going to sound like they kind of work together, right? Does that make sense? They're all using, it's all using notes from the same key. So if I take chords, I don't know, 2, 3, 6, and 5, right? So I'm 2, 2, 3, 6, 5. And that's me playing them in what we call root position, right? Which everybody maybe is aware of when we play the root, the 3rd, and the 5th of the chord. I'll play it again. Okay, that's starting to sound like music. It's not like playing a scale anymore. It's starting to sound like we've got a song. 1 or 2 things we can do to make it sound even more like music would be to play it with some rhythm, right? And to maybe play them with slightly different voicings. We can keep the bass notes in the left hand, but if we play slightly different voicings, and by that I mean using the same 3 notes but in a different order, right? Or inversions, that is another word for it. We might start getting, if we add rhythm and different voicings, this table's in the way, so excuse me. Right? So then we're starting to look at something that sounds like a song. So if you're ever at the point where, I don't know how many of you are writing songs, I'm guessing, looking by the reactions at this stuff, most of you are writing songs already, which is cool. If you're ever unsure of where to start, I think this is a really easy place to start, especially if you're writing pop music. If you're in the beginner class, I had assumed that this would be sort of relatively new information for some of you. That's fine if it's not. But I think that's a cool place to start. So far, everybody's 100% with me, right? Give me a thumbs across if you're not sure. Give me like Caesar's thumb. Okay, we're good. All right. So if you're with me so far, we can extend it a little bit, right? If we add 1 more note to each chord, we get 7th chords. Are we cool with that? I'm extending it a little bit now, and this is where things get a little bit complicated. There's way more to go, obviously, in terms of adding stuff, but let's start here. And I'm going through this really quickly because I've got half an hour, so I do apologize, but please, there'll be questions and stuff in a minute. So if I rush through this stuff, you can ask me questions and I can clear things up for you, if that's cool. So when we look at, because I can't seem to show you my keyboard on Logic, I'll just do it like this. And it's all the wrong way around for you anyway, I'm sure. So when we play a triad, we play a note, right? We skip a note, we play a note, we skip a note. from the scale that we're in, right? So a C major triad, play C, we skip D, play E, skip F, play G, and we keep that pattern going to add the seventh. So we get this major seventh chord, right? Now, if we go through the chords, remember a second ago where I said it was major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Remember that? It's only like 3 minutes ago. I'm sure you remember. So the same thing happens when we add extra notes. We do seventh chords. Except now some of them have got slightly different names. Well, they've all got slightly different names, but some of them have changed quite a lot. Chord 1 is still a major chord, but we call it a major seventh, right? So we've got this major seventh. We've got the seventh note of the major scale on top. If I go through them fairly quickly, chord 2 is now a minor 7. Chord 3 is a minor 7th. Chord 4 is a major 7th. Chord 5 has now become a slightly more interesting chord. It's a dominant 7th. Chord 6, minor 7. And chord 7 now becomes a minor 7, flat 5. Now things are getting complicated. All right. So when we hear long chord names, we see them written down in real books. Anybody who looks into jazz standards and stuff, you might look at a real book and see a chord name like minor 7, flat 5. Right. There's nothing to worry about. All it is it's a descriptive term. When we look at chord symbols, they're just describing something. It's not like a really long, complicated sort of. It's not like a. I imagine sometimes when people look at chord symbols and freak out, it's what I probably feel if I look at any chemical sort of elements or anything, and I see those things and I don't really know what anything means. A D minor 7 flat 5 literally means I play a D minor 7 chord, I find the fifth of that chord, and I take it down a semitone. It's just a long descriptive term. We might see a G7 sharp 5 sharp 9. You go, okay, right. G7, so you find a G7, cool. Sharp 5, okay, I make the fifth sharp. Sharp 9, I have to find the ninth note, okay, and sharpen. All those things so you can break them down into bite-sized chunks. Does that make sense? I'm not going to go deep into those, but don't be afraid of looking at songs with slightly more difficult chord symbols, purely because you're slightly afraid of how long the chord name is. It really is just it's broken down really. You can look at it step by step and figure it out as you go. So, going back to our harmonized scale with seventh chords, we can do the same again, right? We can look at picking a couple of chords, like maybe 4 chords out of that list, and we can add them together to create music, like as a starting point for songs. So if we maybe we could take the same 4 chords that we used last time, which was 2, 3, 6, and 5. One of these chords is going to sound a bit unusual. But the cool thing is, we're not stuck with it. We can change things. If we don't like how one note sounds in a chord, we can change it, right? So chord 2 is now D minor 7. Chord 3, I don't know if this is helpful. Maybe it's not, but chord 2 is D minor 7. Chord 3 is E minor 7. Chord 6 is A minor 7. And G is now G dominant 7. That's the one I think is going to sound a bit weird. If we don't like the sound of it, we can just take the note out that we don't like. And in this case, I think it's that top note, an F, which is going to sound strange. So all I've changed since the first version I played was D minor, E minor, etc. All I've done is add that extra note on top, right? Is add the 7th of each chord on top. So now instead of D minor, it's D minor 7. And again, if I play it in time with a groove, if I play it with different voicings, it starts to sound more like music, right? So then all of a sudden we're in a song, right? That's the start of a pop song, easy. Well, all I've done is pick 4 numbers between 1 and 6. I haven't even explored anything outside of that. I haven't decided to break any rules to create more interest. It's kind of an easy place to start, and it's always something I like to get beginners to look at. And I know some of you are slightly further on than beginners by the sounds of things, which is fantastic. But that's a really cool place to start, I think. Couple more things that I want to do quickly before we get into specific questions and stuff. There are one thing I would really say. I just mentioned it briefly, and that's looking at breaking some of these rules. And you can get some really exciting sounds out of just really kind of breaking the rules. And your ears, because you're all kind of into music and sounds like you're making music and maybe studying music. I don't know if everybody here is a student at the college, but there's some really cool results you can get if you break some of these rules, right? One, I'll give you two examples. Do you remember that song, Forget You by CeeLo? That's not the real title, but that's the clean title. But it says, that one, right? That was my nice singing voice. It's good, right?
Beautiful.
So if I play, the chords are the numbers, right? 1, 2, 4. I can hear people's microphones a little bit more than I could now. Is that because people have unmuted themselves or people have been unmuted? Oh, either way, it's fine. Yeah. So what's happening here is chord 1. Remember what kind of chord 1 was in a major key? Obviously, it's a major chord, right? Chord 2, we said, was a minor chord. Check this out. 1, 2. It's not a minor chord anymore. CeeLo has decided to break the rules. I don't know who he thinks he is, but he's broken the rules. He's played it as a dominant chord, right? D dominant chord. And then chord 4, back to 1. So chord 2, I'll play you both versions, right? I'll play you the version where CeeLo behaves and adheres to the rules and plays chord 2 as a minor chord. Then I'll play you the version that we know. So that's D minor. Let's try it with the D major. Oh, okay. Something's happening there. It's brighter. It's been lifted, and that's just purely breaking the rules. And actually, it's some people would describe it initially when you hear that chord. It can be described as something, because it's a dominant chord where there shouldn't be a dominant chord. People describe it as something called a secondary dominant. I mentioned the chords 1 to 7 earlier, and I called chord 5 a dominant chord. This is all a little bit more advanced now, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway, and you can research it. Chord 5 is a dominant chord. I just played chord 2 as a dominant chord. That's where you get some really interesting results. You start to get unusual notes in there, notes from outside the key signature. So have a look around. If you're starting to write tunes, maybe see what it sounds like to break those rules, right? If you choose chords 2, 3, and 6, cool. Well, what if one of those, what do they sound like as major chords or minor chords? What if chord 5 is played as a minor chord? That's me playing chord 5, the last chord, as a minor chord. It's got an interesting sound, right? It's a slightly different, more unusual sound, less predictable. So one thing I'll say is learn the rules and then just smash them up. Just bust them up. Don't worry too much about them. And it will give you different melodic options. If there are any singers in here, like that'll be really useful for you in terms of creating slightly different sounds melodically. So that's one example of breaking the rule, which is playing chord 2 as a dominant chord. And the other one, which I think is so many people's favorites, and it's a really easy one if you want to just get a little bit, tiny bit of emotion out of something, is playing chords 4 to 1, right? So in this case, if I'm in C, I'm going to play F major, C major. It's called a plagal cadence, for those of you who care, right? You hear it in church, right? But if we sometimes hear chord 4, go to chord 4 minor, so we get this sound, or we get this. It's emotional, right? Anyway, it's obviously not, because I'm not really playing it with any context, but those kinds of tricks become really useful when you start to kind of go, actually, yeah, that's breaking the rules. But the reason that sounds so nice is because it's creating tension. And if you don't take anything else away from today, please take this away. Music really can be condensed to tension and release, in my opinion. That's all music is. I don't care what kind of music it is. If you're listening to dance music, the tension comes from when the DJ takes out the low frequencies. If you've ever been out to a club or a bar or something and the music's on and the low end disappears, oh, okay, something's happening. The low end's gone. What's going on? It's weird. But when the low end comes back, that feeling of, it's like euphoria, right? That comes back. That's tension. If you're listening to John Coltrane or Charlie Parker or any jazz, like where there's improvising, people are creating tension by playing slightly distant notes from outside the chord, right? It's a really common technique is to play outside the chord. So if I'm playing over a C major chord, if I stay on this note, that's not cool, right? It's just tension. But if I go, that tension is then released. That's all that is. So you can create tension through harmony. You can create it through melody, which I've just shown you. You can create it through dynamics, right, and volume. So explore all those things when you're playing, but also when you're composing. There's a really useful technique which is called pedaling, which is where you can keep the same bass note, but you keep the chords moving. So instead of me playing, the most easy chord sequence I can think of is 1, 4, and 5, right? We all know that sequence. 1. Cool. If the bass notes follow those chords, it sounds super straightforward and really easy, right? If I keep the bass notes in the same place, if I play a C under all this, it's a completely different sound. Or if I play a different bass note underneath, if I play a G under all of it, then there's tension. Like stuff's happening. That's all it is. Music's easy. It's just tension and release. It's easy. But just be aware of it as a thing to add moments in your music. If it's soloing or if it's composition or on a gig, you can create moments. But that usually involves creating some tension and releasing the tension. That makes sense? I know this is super quick and I've kind of talked through a few different things. Some of you will know already. Yeah, I'm trying to just get through as quickly as I can. Perhaps the best thing to do, being as we've got like 7 or 8 minutes, maybe some questions if anybody has any. Anybody have any questions?
So what exactly is the next step from this? Is it playing with other instruments? Is it sort of like maybe having to contend with like a guitar track and trying to play with that guitar track and not trying to like intrude? Is that sort of the next step kind of thing?
In terms of the next step, I'm not sure I understand completely what that means, but I would say that is something that's a necessary skill. I don't know if it's the next step, but it's certainly an important skill to have, and that really comes about from having a good grasp of arranging, I would say. Understanding how the two things, and that comes from listening to music, I think, as well. Listen to good arrangements. I'm obviously lucky enough to play with Jamiroquai, and Rob, the guitar player with Jamiroquai, is an incredible arranger for parts. Like his guitar playing, it fits around everything. Not only is he taking into account the keyboard parts, but he's also hearing what the vocal's doing, and he will fill the gaps appropriately. So that is a skill in itself, and that's just listening. That's listening to music, but also listening to your fellow musicians. But I would say the next step, the most important step, if you don't have it down already, is just learning as many of your key signatures as you can. I'm so sorry that that's so boring.
No,
but
it makes complete sense.
Yeah, because it's ultimately, to me, it's the same as understanding, like, if you've got to go and do any job, like if I've got a plumber coming to do something in the house, and the plumber doesn't know what every single one of those tools does. If you see a job that needs doing and you don't know exactly what everything in your arsenal does, ultimately you're not going to be able to do the best job necessarily. That's a potentially awful sort of example, but I think it's kind of fair because you're providing a service as a keyboard player. You know what I mean? So it's a real. What's really great about this is that the keyboard is a finite area. Thankfully, music's fine. Like, I mean, technically finite, but what harmony's finite, I should say, right? Music is mind-blowingly sort of open. Technically finite, I guess, but it's, yeah, I mean, it's the size of the universe, which I suppose is infinite. So I'm contradicting myself. It's terrifying. But harmony, at least, we know there's a certain number of chords we can get to, and we pretty much have got a lot of it covered, right? So it's not massive. When you start arranging for bigger ensembles, obviously you can use the scope for bigger arrangements and stuff, and bigger harmonic sort of changes or harmonic arrangements. It grows, obviously, the bigger the ensemble. If you're writing for a 4-piece vocal ensemble, the human voice can only reach so far. Extend that over to an orchestra, and we've got a few more octaves to play with, etc., etc. But I would say this here is well within people's grasp, but I would say none of it will make any sense unless you have those fundamental blocks in place.
Sure.
Yeah, which is not exciting, but it's important. But any music any of you have ever listened to is based on not necessarily the writer knowing those things, and there are those people who are really lucky enough to be able to write music, but it takes a long time for a lot of those people. I know that. But some people can write music without knowing this stuff, and that's great. But I don't think many people could just jump on a gig and do a gig without knowing a lot of this stuff. It will take people a long time. If somebody throws a chord chart at you and says, "Yeah, cool, we're on in like 10 minutes." Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, which I've been unfortunate enough to be in that position. but it's doable. But yeah, has anybody else got any other questions before we go?
Yeah, I have a question.
Simon,
is it okay?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sure. So the progression you played, like the 2, 3, 6, 5.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you mentioned that you really didn't like the 7th of the dominant chord. Do you know what I'm?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any really strong feelings about it, but it was just an example of breaking a rule. But go ahead.
I really do. I also really don't like the 7th on the dominant chord when playing pop music. And I was like wondering how you would voice that chord, like in a scenario where you don't want to play the 7th. Like,
I mean, I would
do with it.
In that example, I would probably strip it back down to just being a triad. If you're in pop music, I think a lot of pop music. I mean, it's rare for pop music to really get into really extended chords. I think some of it is out there, but I would say I would maybe play as a triad. Or one thing I quite like playing in that kind of music is playing a triad, but so. I can't get into it now, unfortunately, but we've all heard of sus4 chords, right?
Yeah.
Where the 4th replaces the 3rd. I quite enjoy, in this sort of context, playing both together. So the 3rd and the 4th make an appearance. So we get this sound. It's like a slightly ambiguous, you can't quite tell the tonality of the chord. It's not necessarily obviously a major chord. It's not obviously a sus chord, but I'm playing G, B, C, and D. Sounds like "Oh, When the Saints," right?
Could you like quickly play that, like with some rhythmic context, or like how would you play that in Jamiroquai?
So 2. There.
Wow, I like it.
Right.
Hi guys.
That kind of thing.
Okay,
we ran out of time. Half an hour goes fast.
Well, we've run out of time. I'm sorry, guys, that I didn't get to cover more stuff, but hopefully some of that was of some use. I don't know how many people there are in the next group and whether there's any room, but that's Michael's call, I'm afraid. But
thank you very much, Nate, for the great class. I'm sure everybody had a great time. There's someone with a mic on that is quite loud. That can be turned on. Turned off. So yeah, very much appreciated. So if you guys again could take a screenshot and just put it on social media as Del with at the London School of Music and hashtag online lessons, LSM online lessons.
All right.
And yeah, thanks again, Nate, for being here with us today. And
no, it's my pleasure.
it will be maybe interesting to do another class in the next couple of weeks. We can talk with the students and see when Nate is available, and we can maybe try and arrange another class.
Yeah, it'd be good, and we can see if we can extend it a little bit and get into some more details.
Exactly, a bit longer. We'll be in touch with everyone via email just to arrange that. Good. Thank you very much to the first group. I'll leave it up to hear the.
Thank you very much.